Okay, today we're going to look at Search for My Tongue, which is one of the poems that you need to look at for your IGCSE English literature. Let's read the poem first. Make sure you've got a copy of it in front of you. Search for my tongue. You ask me what I mean by saying I've lost my tongue. I ask you, what would you do if you had two tongues in your mouth and lost the first one, the mother tongue? And you could not really know the other, the foreign tongue. You could not use them both together, even if you thought that way. And if you lived in a place you had to speak a foreign tongue, your mother tongue would rot and die in your mouth. Until you had to spit it out. I thought I spit it out, but overnight while I dream. Munde hutu ki akiji bakibasha, me tunki nakiche. Parantu ratre sopnama maribasha, pachiaveche. Fulnijam maribasha marijib, moramakileche. Fulnijam maribasha marijib, moramapakeche. It grows back, a stump of a shoot, grows longer, grows moist, grows strong veins. It ties the other tongue in knots. The bud opens in my mouth. It pushes the other tongue aside. Every time I think I've forgotten, I think I've lost the mother tongue. It blossoms out of my mouth. I'm just going to go through a few things that I think that are really important with this poem. It's a poem, I think, which explores what it feels like to move to another country, and then you learn another language, and in the process of doing that and having to use that new language all the time, your old language, your mother tongue, your native language kind of gets lost, and you forget to use it, and you stop using it. And it's all to do with the emotions that are stirred up because of that. And there are so many emotions in this poem. So one of the things that I would do is kind of like sort of down one side of the poem is just kind of track what those emotions might be. And there are all sorts of things, and they're open to interpretation a little bit. I think you could argue that at the beginning it starts off and it's kind of maybe quite angry, quite accusatory. If you look at the beginning, it says, you ask me what I mean. It's almost kind of like quite finger pointing. You ask me what I mean by saying I've lost my tongue. And I ask you, what would you do? Do you know what I mean? There's a real sense of frustration there, but I think it's also kind of quite angry and quite bitter and quite accusatory, like as if you don't know what this is like. Do you know what I mean? There's that kind of sort of feeling coming across there. It's very direct, isn't it? And so one of the things that you can pick out is the use of the word you. This use of direct address, the use of a second person pronoun, because it really engages and involves the reader in that sense. You feel as if they're talking to you and, as I say, maybe sort of pointing the finger at you a little bit. At the very least, trying to get you to empathise with their situation and what it feels like for them. In the first section of the poem, there's, I think, quite a lot of negative emotions, really. As I say, maybe some anger, maybe some bitterness, but also some disgust, I think. There's this really gross image, isn't there, where it talks about a tongue rotting in your mouth. Actually, just take a little bit of time to think about that. Think of your own tongue. Think of two tongues in your mouth and how uncomfortable that would feel. But also then think of one of them rotting. Think of it kind of decomposing and turning green or black, and then parts of it flaking off. And you can smell and you can taste the rotting flesh in your mouth. It's a really gross image. And I think you're meant to experience that as you're reading the poem, because look at that repetition of the word rot. When you have a word repeated twice like that, once after another, then you can call it epizeuxis. And the poet deliberately uses that word rot once after another like that. And look at where they're placed as well. The word rot is right at the end of a line, and it's right at the beginning of a line, isn't it? And so the poet is really emphasising that word and that image and that idea by the placement of the words at that moment. So there's a sense of disgust. There's also quite a lot of plosives that I think emphasise this as well. So if you look at the very end of that first section, it says, until you had to spit it out. I thought I spit it out. Look at the plosives there, the t sounds. It's almost kind of onomatopoeic, isn't it? Because you can hear the spit kind of happening, can't you? So again, there's maybe a sense of anger and a sense of disgust, but certainly lots of very negative emotions going on. Then we get this really odd section where it slips into Gujarati. So Gujarati is an Indian language, but it happens mid-sentence as well. So if you look at it, when it says overnight while I dream, it's then a comma, and just immediately you launch into this Gujarati section. You need to answer, well, why is that? One of the points about form and structure you're going to need to be talking about is, well, why have this huge section in Gujarati right in the middle? I think it maybe happens mid-sentence to emphasize this idea of it being unexpected, that it's thrilling that it happens, that suddenly she slips into Gujarati and it's kind of, it was unexpected, but oh, wow, listen to this. Do you know what I mean? It's this unexpected thrill, this moment of excitement that is sort of revealed, and you experience it with her here. You then need to think, well, okay, so there's the Gujarati script, the Gujarati writing, but there's also like a sort of an anglicized phonetic version underneath that you, as a reader, can read. And you need to think, well, okay, so why is that? And I think that's to do with, it's one of two things. Either you could go down the route of saying, well, she's forcing you to go through what she's had to go through in terms of learning this other language that was completely foreign and alien to her, getting your tongue around sounds and words that you're completely unfamiliar with. And so she's forcing you to go through that painful, difficult process, if you like. Or maybe she's encouraging you to empathize with her in that sense, to experience that with her. Maybe also there's a sense that she wants you to say the words because she wants you to appreciate the sounds. She wants you to realize how beautiful they are. Listen to the sounds of this. This is my language. It's amazing. It's kind of like what she's doing, maybe. And then we've got this final section, which is kind of like an English paraphrase version of the Gujarati bit that we've just heard. Okay, so they're kind of like a sort of paraphrased sort of translation of each other, where you get this amazing plant metaphor, don't you? And there's this sense of anticipation and excitement, and there's a sense of awe and wonder. Look at it where it says it grows back. A stump of a shoot grows longer, grows moist, grows strong veins. Look at the tripartite sequence there. This kind of triplet, this list of three going on. Look at the sense of anticipation and awe and wonder and excitement and beauty that she reveals here in this bit. There's a real contrast in this poem between the last section of the poem and the first one. The first one was very negative, wasn't there? And that final section is really positive. There's a sense of relief and passion and excitement as opposed to the bitterness and the anger and the frustration and the disgust that we had in that first section. And in terms of what the poem's about, I think it's to do with this idea of your language is an intrinsic part of your identity. And she's searching for it, so the search for my tongue, because it is so important, because it's so much part of it, part of her. Your language, you think with your language, don't you? Your first words, your first experiences are molded by your language. Your whole worldview is determined by the way that you speak and the way you form your ideas. You can't separate you and the way that you think and the person that you are from the language that you speak. Is kind of like what this poem is about, I think. And so when her mother tongue returns, look at the things that return. There's this sense of beauty suggested by the word blossoms. There's a sense of potential and hope for new life as suggested by the word bud. And then there's this sense of strength, like deep internal strength, I think, emphasised this idea of the strong veins. Look at the positive pre-modification there with the strong veins. So there are a few things that I think this poem is about.